So, I think we slowly get started. A very warm welcome, dear colleagues. I'm really pleased to see so many of you here. Thank you for spending part of your Saturday night with us. I'm very happy that some of you were able to make it, and I'm absolutely convinced that we will have a very interesting event, and I'm very much looking forward to it, and I hope you will also find it as exciting as I expect it to be. Let me give you a brief introduction first of myself. I'm Henning Wüster. I'm the director of the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency, ICAT, and I'm here together with my colleague, Ms. Randa Ahmed, who is supporting the ICAT Secretariat with country engagement, and we are very pleased to have with us two of the countries that ICAT has been working with for quite some time on different topics, and we are currently working with them on a topic that is the topic of the event tonight, the transparency for just transitions, or, if you like, the monitoring and evaluation of just transitions. We will hear tonight some high-level opening remarks from the co-organizers of this side event, the lead co-organizer, Nigeria, and I'll introduce the speakers in a short moment to you. Then we'll have a presentation from the World Resource Institute, who is also the partner in the work and the co-organizer of this side event, and I'm very pleased that they've been able to join us here, and I think you will hear about the work that they have done and are continuing to do in a short while. And then I'm looking forward to a panel discussion where we will hear some perspectives from 3 countries, Nigeria, South Africa, and Scotland, and I'm told that I should emphasize that Scotland is still part of the United Kingdom. And then please be ready to also come with questions, and because we would be happy to have an engaged discussion. And I'm very pleased to say, and I should have mentioned this before, that on the panel we also have some representatives from trade union movements, and that is, I think, a very, very valuable perspective. So let me briefly introduce the topic to you, because it's perhaps not that obvious. I mean, I think it's obvious to everybody that to address climate change will require transformational change. And that means in basically for all economies, some fundamental economic changes. Those are not obvious and not evident, and they will clearly have economic implications. They will have impacts on development, and those impacts will be both positive and negative ones. And in order to make the required transformational change possible, to make it feasible, it is important to address the negative consequences and try to amplify, of course, the positive ones. The socioeconomic impacts are at the center of attention and have been most prominent, and that's where the concept of just transition resulted from. Sometimes this is linked to a concept of gender inclusive transition, and we may hear that from some of our panelists, and that depends really country by country how it is implemented. But the focus today is not generally about just transitions, but on the transparency aspects of just transitions. And this is the focus of ICAT, which has been created at the time when the Paris Agreement was adopted to support developing countries. And the focus of ICAT support cuts across the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement, but we have a specific focus on supporting the assessment of climate policies and actions. And there, of course, this is an assessment of their impacts in terms of greenhouse gas levels, but we also support countries in assessing climate policies and actions for their sustainable development impacts. And that was the basis for then moving into looking at just transition. Transparency is the basis for stakeholder engagement. Without transparency, without data about policies and actions, it is impossible to engage stakeholders in a meaningful way. And of course, stakeholder engagement is absolutely central for a just transition. So that's where the two come together, that the transparency for just transition is essential as a building block for a framework that allows transformational change, a framework that ensures that nobody is left behind and does so in a way that builds confidence among those that are potentially affected by climate policies and actions. So this was the basis for ICAT, together with WI as our lead partner in this work, to develop a methodological framework for the monitoring and evaluation of just transitions. And we have a draft of that framework that you will hear about in a short moment. And we are now working with South Africa and Nigeria to implement the framework. So with that introduction, let me invite our high-level speakers to offer their opening remarks. And I'm very pleased to welcome, first of all, Mr. Adamu Sumi Gisos, who is Director of Special Duties and Projects in the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, and the government focal point for the ICAT Just and Gender Inclusive Transition project. This is currently under implementation in Nigeria, and I'm very pleased to have Mr. Adamu Sumi Gisos with us, since I know he's passionate about just transition and the enhancement of sustainable livelihood for the labor force at both national and subnational levels. Tonight, he is representing the Honorable Minister of Labor and Employment of the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, His Excellency Dr. Simon Bako Lalong, who was unfortunately not able to travel here, but I'm very pleased that we are able to hear his words through Mr. Adamu Sumi Gisos. The floor is yours, please.
The ICAT Director, Dr. Henny, other UN staff in the ICAT headquarters, distinguished panelists, and other delegates from different countries, good evening. It's unfortunate, due to some happenings at the last minute, the minister could not make it. He sent his apology, and he wishes us that we will have a good deliberation. So I'm here to read what he will have done. So as I've already observed the protocol, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to be here to declare open these very important side events on transition of just transition and to co-host with Initiative for Climate Action Transparency, ICAT, and South Africa. I'm highly commended the Secretariat team from ICAT, the South African Presidential Climate Change Commission, the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, Nigeria, and indeed the Council on Climate Change for the planning of the interaction and collaboration effort put to bring this event to a successful reality. Nigeria has been actively participating in the Conference of Parties of this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Nigeria takes all climate change concern to her heart and also continue to ensure the relevant policies are put in place to tackle the emergent issues with regard to climate action. One of the policy actions in Nigeria in the National Climate Change Act, which was passed in November 2022, which seeks to achieve low greenhouse gas emission, green and sustainable growth by providing the framework to set the target to reach net zero between 2050 and 2070. It is therefore evidence that the federal government of Nigeria is passionate on climate action. In the past, the climate change movement has been mainly focused on environment, but losing sight of the resilient impact of climate change on livelihood and work culture of the working population. The just transition concept stemmed from the effort of labor unions strive to strike the balance between involving the environmental needs and securing the justice for workers. The just transition concept focuses on the ensuring that no one is left behind in the move from environmental harmful work process to low carbon and resilient economy, under printing the crux of the green economy. The global interest in the shift of green economy call for informed decision on how to ensure that the labor force is not put out of work in which bid to transit to green job. The Federal Ministry of Labor is responsible for preparation, formulation, coordination, monitoring, review, implementation, and enforcing all government policy and regulation which relate to employment generation, labor protection, productivity movement, industrial peace, and harmony on occupational safety and health in workplaces. It is therefore fault on the ministry to ensure a just transition on behalf of the federal government and to ensure that transparency of the process as well. The concept of just transition has evolved into a significant framework for guiding the shift from the fossil fuel-based economy to more sustainable one, to patronize the welfare of workers and communities, ensuring that no person or community is left behind. The ministry in 2021 attended COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. Delegation of the Ministry of Labor and Employment had high-level discussion with the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency Director, Ms. Dr. Henny, at the COP27 in November 22. In the spirit of partnership and cooperation, the federal government of Nigeria, through the Federal Ministry of Labor, is supported by ICAT to develop a monitoring, reporting, and verification, MRVP, of a just and gender-inclusive transition. Thus, a project cooperation agreement on the ICAT Nigerian project MRV of just and gender-inclusive transition was signed by the Ministry and the United Office on the project's services. The project started in November 2022, and it was initially meant to end by 31st October 2023, but extended to June 2024, solely to ensure proper completion of the project. We wish to thank the director for that extension. The specification objectives of the just gender-inclusive transitions are to develop a measurement, reporting, and verification system to track just and gender-inclusive action, ensure the system linked with related sectorial measurement, reporting, and verification system implemented by the Federal Ministry of Environment. To enable a tripartite cooperation between government, labor, and employer association to achieve a just and gender-inclusive transition going forward as a Nigerian committed contribution to the United Nations for implementation. To support policymakers in setting up just gender-inclusive MRV system while designing a related roadmap to track just transition impact of climate policy and action. The project adopted an approach of the triplet cooperation between government, labor, and employing association to ensure the transparency and transition process. The project is focused on tracking just transition in the agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector, and the energy sector, including the tracking of gender inclusive across relevant sectors of the economy. It has also been in notice so far that just among the stakeholders and clear understanding of the just transition process is key to achieving the desired objective of the project. Proper awareness creation across all sectors on the impact of climate change and the need for just transition in an offshoot of climate action will build trust, creative ownership of the just transition movement into a green economy. It is also key to note that one of the pillars of just transition is dedicated funding stream to support transition program and effort, including job training and job creation. It is therefore timely to call for and push for a more deliberate action through capacity building programs, empowering and training workshops on new and emerging work process to enable effective just transition to the low carbon and green economy, thereby engaging a sustainable growth. On this note, I therefore employ everyone to continue informed discussion on ways to drive the just transition concept and also to ensure a transparency of this process. On this note, I wish to declare this event open and wish all the fruitful discussion and a good outcomes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adamu, for delivering this extremely important statement on behalf of the Honorable Minister. Labor and Employment. And I mean, I want to congratulate the government of Nigeria for the strong commitment, strong policy commitment for climate action, and the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment of expanding or playing its role in making sure that this is a just and gender inclusive transition. We're really extremely honored to be able to work with your ministry. And I was hoping now to introduce another speaker, another high-level speaker from Nigeria, who must have been kept somewhere else. So I suggest that we see whether he can still join us later on, and we proceed now with the panel discussion. And I would then like to, before proceeding with the panel discussion, we proceed with the presentation of the methodology. And so I'm pleased to introduce to you Mario Julian Diaz from the World Resource Institute, and he will give us an overview of the work that has already been completed and some outlook for the work ahead.
Thank you so much for all the high-level ministers here, for all the UN staff here, for all the distinguished experts here, and all guests. My name is Mario Julian Diaz, and I work at the World Resources Institute, and I'm a research manager there working on some elements related to just transition as part of a wider team. For the past year and a half, my wider team and I have been working on a just transition tracking guide. And this tracking guide we're working on together with ICAT. Thank you so much, Henning, in advance. And it provides an overall methodology for countries that are seeking to monitor and evaluate and learn from their social, economic, and environmental impacts of their just transition policies in a transparent way. And overall, to better showcase how the guide contributes to increasing accountability and transparency, I'll begin with an overview of our development process and then share a brief outline of the guide, touching on the most essential components. Next slide. So the development of the guide is followed by two ongoing and parallel implementation efforts. As you can see here from the map, one of them is taking place, from the slide, one of them is taking place in South Africa, and the other one is taking place in Nigeria. In the case of South Africa, we have been working with the Presidential Climate Change Commission to support the developing of a monitoring and evaluation approach for South Africa's just transition framework. In the case of Nigeria, we've been working with the Ministry of Labor and Employment, as well as a team of consultants assessing just transition implications of their NDC implementation process and designing a just and gender inclusive transition monitoring, reporting, and verification framework. The guide has been further informed by additional research which we've done, desktop research in addition to consultations with a wide variety of stakeholders, sectoral experts, and doing interviews with other countries that are at different stages of the just transition process, some of which are present here today. Next slide. So as a result, the guide takes an economy-wide approach to monitoring the impacts of just transition strategies and policies, providing a step-by-step approach that is not particular to any one type of transition, but rather it can be followed regardless of the stage in the just transition process that a country is at, or the sectoral transition that is pursued. The guide also provides general guidance rather than guidance limited to specific contexts, serving as a versatile framework that can be applied across various situations, industries, scenarios, and just transition levels or stages. The flexibility creates opportunity for innovation, fostering the development of context-specific solutions while adhering to the overarching methodology. Next slide. So as our moderator mentioned, it is very, very important when dealing with the just transition process to involve stakeholders at every stage, not just at the beginning, but also when it comes to creating a just transition vision, as well as the tracking of just transition itself. The guide encourages the involvement of stakeholders along every step of the way in the proposed methodology. By involving them directly as well as relevant parties such as community members, workers, advocacy groups, a broader range of experiences are able to be brought to the table and be able to be incorporated into this level of work that is done at a national level or a sectoral level or whatever stage a country is at. This inclusivity not only enhances the quality of the data that is collected, but also contributes to a more holistic evaluation, capturing a multifaceted impacts of the policies and strategies pursued. In addition, engaging stakeholders in the monitoring and evaluation builds a sense of ownership and accountability of the process itself. And it also enhances the credibility and legitimacy of the assessment and strengthens the foundation of long-term successes and positive impacts. Next slide. To best capture and make sense of these insights, the guide is organized into 3 distinct parts. The first part provides an introduction and overview, which begins by detailing a history of just transitions, why it is necessary to track progress towards identified goals, and the need for supporting the implementation and achievement of a just transition. The second part describes the foundation of the just transition process and how the just transition should be built on inclusive decision-making, active stakeholder participation, as I mentioned before, to effectively capture the country's just transition visions and goals. And the third part contains the essential steps for tracking progress. This discusses how to establish a proper tracking system by working with impacted stakeholders to identify key indicators, establish a data collection process, and transparently report progress. For the sake of time, I'll only briefly touch on what we consider as the essential steps for tracking progress. Next slide. So the first step in tracking progress begins with the development of goals of a just transition. Without identified goals, the objectives of a transition can remain vague and lack the foundation for tracking progress. This process can be achieved by co-designing goals with stakeholders, ensuring alignment with a stated vision, tailoring goals to priority needs, and finalizing the goals together with stakeholders at the table. The second step is to formulate indicators to monitor, and the process begins by selecting the most relevant impact areas that will be monitored, then identifying indicators specific to those impact areas or categories, selecting the level of disaggregation needed, and then developing targets to track progress towards them. The third step is to identify a proper data collection method, and to do this, it is important to design an overall coordination body, which could help design different tracking methods that will be used and determine the appropriate data collection that should be done. And the final step is when it comes to transparency. Being able to share your results to your constituents helps to provide accountability and build stakeholder confidence, which at the end of the day is the overall goal for the just transition in a specific country. Next slide. So the overall guide is divided into 3 main objectives. The first is to increase accountability and transparency, as I mentioned in the previous point, in climate action by transparently sharing information on the decision-making processes that had been done, the goals that had been designed, the strategies that had been identified, and the impacts that each are having, thus allowing stakeholders to hold decision-makers accountable for their stated commitments. The second is to strengthen the effectiveness of strategies and policies by assessing the environmental, social, economic implications of actions on different sectors and communities, and gauge the social equity dimensions of such actions and make improvements and adjust them according as necessary. The third is to track the equitable distribution of benefits and burdens and make certain that the actions taken do not inadvertently exacerbate existing inequalities, but rather foster a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient society. So in an era where in an era where world is undergoing profound transformations, a just transition must be carefully monitored to guarantee that workers, communities, and vulnerable people are included if we are to transition our economies in a way that is equitable for all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mario. And please do note down any questions that you may have. We will be able to take them up after the panel discussion. And I hope you will give us any observations that you have on this framework, because this is the purpose of one of the purposes of the event today, is to also get feedback on how we are developing this, so we can refine it in a way that is most effective. Now, I'm extremely pleased that we've been joined by Dr. Salisu Dahiru, and I want to invite him to address us now. Dr. Salisu is the Director General of the National Climate Change Council of Nigeria, which is directly under the President of Nigeria, and we are extremely honored to have him here with us. So, Dr. Salisu, please.
Good evening, Dr. Henning and the rest of the dignitaries here. I do start by apologizing most sincerely for coming late. Our President left us in the safe hands of my Ministers of Environment, and both of them thinking of how to share the responsibility of steering the affairs of Nigeria in this COP for the remaining days. So I get drawn from two very powerful sides. So I was held in a meeting with them. I do sincerely apologize. Needless to say so, but first to express our sincere thanks and gratitude to ICAT for all the support that has been given to Nigeria in the last couple of years, right from when the partnership between ICAT and Nigeria began through the Ministry of Environment, Department of Climate Change, and then it was later migrated to the National Council on Climate Change when it was established. I do recall the very useful engagements that we had in Nairobi on the sidelines of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week, which saw us reviewing the existing projects that have been in the pipeline that ICAT is supporting Nigeria with, projects that have really proved very valuable and adding value to our journey towards fulfilling those key obligations that Nigeria has made under its commitment in its NDCs and also under the Paris Agreement. This we are interested in continuing in the best fashion of partnership, and also ensuring that we are able to deliver results on the ground for Nigeria and also for ICAT, such that the reporting platform that we have set to have in place for Nigeria, such that we can keep and maintain our requirements for timely reporting of the progress in the country, and also tracking all the various activities within the NDCs are met as at when due. This support is very critical, bearing in mind that the National Council on Climate Change climate change is very new. It's still in its infancy. It's still struggling with finding its feet among projects and programs or institutions of government that are grappling with issues of adequate funding as well as adequate institutional guidance. And we find ICAT being there for the council and helping it to work and to also work side by side with more established entities within the country, to the extent that when we submit our progress reports, some of the questions that we started receiving was that if organizations like ICAT are supporting you, then we feel that you have no need for support from the budget, and we laugh at that. But this is just to say how strategic this arrangement and this partnership is. And I want to also assure you that we are not taking this support and partnership for granted. We value it, we treasure it, and we will do the best that we can to ensure that we deepen this partnership and ensure actual progress on the ground for Nigeria going forward. I beg to stop at this stage so that I'll sit down and listen to the panel discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, Dr. Salisu. It's really very much appreciated that you were able to come and to take a break from your other commitments that are surely extremely important here. And I must want to underline that ICAT is extremely honored to be able to work with the National Climate Change Council. And I'm also pleased that you are joining us here for this event, which focuses on a project that's under the leadership of the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment. And because I think the engagement of the National Climate Change Council in that overall effort is critical in order to make it a success. And it's, I think, also a wonderful coincidence that we have in Nigeria a council that is headed by the president, as we have also in South Africa a presidential climate change commission that is taking this work forward, which I think underlines this whole of government approach that is really critical for the kind of transformational change that will be required eventually to tackle climate change, which I refer to in my introductory words. So thank you again for joining us. And with that, I now would like to move to our panel discussion and invite the panelists to join us here. And I'll introduce them one by one and would then invite them to come to the podium and sit next to their nameplates. So we are very pleased to have Dr. Peter Tafer with us, who serves as the team lead for the development of Nigeria's just and gender-inclusive transition monitoring, reporting, and verification framework. And Dr. Tafer is well known to ICAT. He has been a very strong supporter of ICAT's work in Nigeria for a long time. I would say he is actually to be thanked for his effort of bringing ICAT to Nigeria. He has been in government in various positions, as including as the UNFCCC focal point for Nigeria, and also as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Environment, and most recently in the Ministry of Labor and Employment. And so we are really extremely pleased to have such an experienced and seasoned expert with such a broad knowledge and background with us today, and also as a lead for the project in ICAT, in Nigeria. Please join us here on the stage, Peter Terfer. Then I'm very happy to also welcome Ms. Katie Ross, the Head of Monitoring, Evaluation and Content on the Presidential Climate Change Commission of South Africa. In this role, Katie leads the monitoring function of the Commission and ensures the production of high-quality research products focused on issues related to the just transition. Katie Ross is an associate in the Global Climate Program of the World Resource Institute and is working with a range of countries to develop and update their climate commitments under the UNFCCC framework. Katie has worked internationally and in South Africa for the past 15 years, and we are really pleased that she has been able to join us here tonight. Katie, please join us on the stage. The third panelist that I would like to welcome is Nick Robbins, who is Commissioner on the Just Transition Commission in Scotland. Nick Robbins is Professor in Practice for Sustainable Finance with the Grantham Research Institute at the London School of Economics. And Nick has an experience of over 20 years in sustainable finance, in banking, investment, and financial regulations. A core focus of his work is how to mobilize investment for a just transition. He is the founder of the UK's Financing a Just Transition Alliance and author of The Road to Net Zero Finance for the UK's Climate Change Committee. And he leads the finance platform for the place-based climate action network, working with the Climate Commission in Belfast, Edinburgh, the Climate Change Commissions in Belfast, Edinburgh, and Leeds. So very happy to welcome here. Please join us on the stage. We are still expecting Comrade Eche Asusu, but I believe he has not yet been able to join us. So we'll leave that seat empty for the moment and hope that he will still be able to join us. But I'm very pleased to welcome then as the fourth panelist, Ms. Diane Junquera Curiel, who is acting director at the Just Transition Center and Energy Industries of the Industrial All Global Union and special advisor at the International Trade Union Center. Diana started work in the oil sector in Spain at the headquarters of the Spanish oil and gas company Repsol. She joined the UGT union, that's the Spanish trade union, and became a workplace representative and eventually head of international relations. And after participating in global energy sector committees, she moved to Industry All in 2016, and since 2021 she works part-time at the ITUC Just Transition Center. So we are really pleased to have her with us. Please join us here on the podium. So let me begin with Peter Terfer, and I would like to invite you to give us an overview of the background to the work underway in Nigeria on just and gender inclusive transition. Can you explain to us what were the criteria used to guide the mapping of key stakeholders and which strategies proved efficient in engaging them. How has or will this participatory and constructive approach feed into the next steps of the process of developing the M&E for just transitions in Nigeria? Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, distinguished delegates and members of the high table. It's really indeed a great pleasure to be here today. Before probably I give a response to these particular questions, it's just to acknowledge that the NLC representative, Comrade Echi, has come in. I think he's the one seated at the back. Okay, so probably he should come to his position here. So having said that, the speech, the opening remarks of the Honorable Minister of Labor and Employment has highlighted some of the backgrounds on why Nigeria even opted for this particular project on the just and gender inclusive transition. Basically, he highlighted the issues of the scope of the project itself, the clear objectives, as well as the expected outcomes of this very important project. Talking of the scope, we have stratified the project into two clear scopes. The first one has to be with a scoping whereby we need to engage various stakeholders in the country. You know, Nigeria is so diverse and it has a lot of entities that needs to be consulted. So this is basically what was done in the scoping phase. We are just rounding up the scoping phase before we go into the second phase, which has to do with issues of the design and analysis and then writing of the final report. Then now coming to your own questions about mapping of the key stakeholders, we identified about 4 criteria which was used actually to map out these key stakeholders. One, we consider the sectoral analysis. There are several sectors that we felt should be involved in the preparation of this very important document. And like the name of the project implies, it is just and gender inclusive transition MRV framework. So we also looked at the gender inclusivity in the preparation of the document. Another very important consideration was actually the geographical reach. Looking at the diversity and the broadness of the country, we thought of also bringing the subnationals into the preparation of this document. The country is made up of 36 states and also different geography. The northern part of the country is facing the Sahara Desert and therefore is a bit much more drier, while if you go to the southern part of the country, it is inundated with issues of erosion and flooding due to the geography. So there's a lot of migration and movement between the north and the south looking for greener pastures and enhanced means of livelihood. Another criteria we used, we also looked at the economic impact. What will be the economic impact of the just transition? Which of the sectors will really be hit the most? And arising from it, we now looked at the issue of agriculture, because agriculture happens to be the major employer of labor in the country, and forestry, all under the LULUCF and the AFOLO, as well as the oil and gas, because the country is an oil-producing country, its GDP is heavily dependent on extraction of fossil fuel and its utilization. So these were the critical criteria that we used in mapping the stakeholders. I want participants that are here, maybe from other countries, to really think very deeply when they are also putting in their own criteria of how do they map their own stakeholders. It's very important because, like Director Henning said, that once there's no transparency, you will not be able to carry the stakeholders alone. So, and one of the key approach to transparency is inclusivity. So that is one of the areas we did. And then in terms of the efficiency of our engagement strategies, we approach it through a multi-stakeholder dialogues where we brought not only ministries, departments of agencies of government, but civil society organizations were equally involved. The media were deeply involved in the whole process for the purpose of reporting and for awareness creation and advocacy. We also brought in even faith-based organizations because they have the comparative advantage of really getting to the people. We also encourage public awareness across the whole strata using the media very broadly. During our inception workshops and the follow-up workshops, we were able to get the press who interviewed major stakeholders. And through that, we were able to reach almost every household in Nigeria that either has television or radio, that at least they have heard that government is doing something on developing a framework for a just transition. It was a very vital instrument, and any country that really wants to go into preparation of its own just transition, it is very, very important to carry the media along. We also went to another approach, which we consider it very efficient for engagement, is getting feedback. MDAs, that is ministries, departments, and agencies, were given the opportunity to sit down and write because we observed that in some certain workshops, maybe stakeholders may not have the opportunity to really give a complete feedback in the course of oral presentation. So we have given them the opportunity to go back in the comfort of your own office, write a feedback to us on what you feel should be included in a just transition, and how do you feel that your sector will really be affected. So this was a very valuable approach whereby it will help us when we come into the second phase of the implementation of this product. You did ask about the impact on the next steps. That is when we come into the phase 2. One of the key impacts, which will be this issue of inclusivity. It is a big impact because several entities felt that they are now part and parcel of the development of such an important national document. We also were very happy because at the end of the day, it will give legitimacy to the document, meaning that several stakeholders have been involved. They have a feeling now that they are part and parcel of it. One key thing I have learned from my interaction with several donor organizations, especially like UNDP, they will tell us that, look, invite several stakeholders, even if you feel they don't have relevance on the subject. It will surprise you the kind of feedback that you will eventually get. And they will also serve as instruments for advocacy, for going to areas where you will not even be able to go yourself. They will go back and inform their own constituency that I am coming from the center. I have been to the nation's capital. We discuss such a document like this, and government is bringing something forward for the benefit of impacted community. So that in itself is bringing legitimacy into the final product, and it's also bringing inclusivity in it. One other important impact on the next steps will be the aspect of sustainability. This document will eventually be sustained because there's involvement. And also, we've been able to gather data and information which future review or future activities can build on it. So I think these are a few things I will need to say. I have something to say about the opportunities, the challenges we have faced, as well as the lessons we have learned from this. But probably if there's time, when we come to the next round. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tafa, and I think this was extremely impressive, and I think you highlighted very clearly the importance of a strong process of engaging stakeholders. And I mean, from what you said, I would dare to conclude that the process is almost, or perhaps as important as the content, and I'd be happy if other panelists reflect on this and from their perspective comment on that. But I think you've really underlined what such a process entails in a very impressive way. Let me move then to South Africa and invite Katie Ross to give us some highlights of the work in South Africa. And we have to keep now the interventions to 5 minutes because I see the clock is ticking faster than I had expected. Somehow it is happening so often when you have interesting conversations. So, Katie, having identified the socioeconomic and environmental impacts to be mitigated, what were the steps to set targets and identify indicators to be tracked for the just transition strategy in South Africa? What role played the transparency process in that target setting process, and how did you engage stakeholders in South Africa? Katie, please.
Thank you, Henning, and it's a real pleasure to be here this evening. I'm with the Presidential Climate Commission in South Africa, and this is a body that was set up in 2020 by the President to oversee and facilitate the just transition in the country. And we're pretty unique in our composition in that we're chaired by the President, which already demands a high degree of political will for this transition. We say in South Africa the just transition is core to all that we do on climate. And this commission comprises government ministers, civil society groups, labor, academia, traditional leadership, and business. And it's quite innovative in that it's by default forming the social partnership to accelerate the just transition and bringing these groups together to forge consensus around the difficult trade-offs that the transition will bring. Just to situate this tracking work, a year ago, our cabinet approved the Just Transition Framework for the country. This is the overriding policy document that's going to guide South Africa's just transition in the years ahead. It sets a long-term vision for 2050 that incorporates not only climate goals, mitigation and adaptation, but importantly, how are you going to support those that are going to be impacted in the years ahead. We have a very strong focus on justice in the country from our legacy, but also in the just transition. So core to this framework is the embodiment of procedural justice, distributive justice, and restorative justice. And we know we've got to have fundamental changes in the way social support is delivered to our people, in the way we diversify our economies, and in the way we grow our skills. And this is what the framework sets out. And then you get a question, well, how goes that battle on the just transition in the country? How are things going? And that gives rise to this project that we're working on within the Commission with the generous support of ICAT. So thank you very much for that, Henning. And we're really digging into how can we really tell we're on the right track and that we're doing more harm and less good. And I won't go into the detailed indicators per se, but our tracking work is guided by four main principles. The one is that we're very keen to improve policy and decision making. When we produce evidence and recommendation, they're tabled directly to the President, and that's how we affect change. We have to focus on all facets of the just transition for it to be useful. We need to be tracking how are these justice dimensions being changed. What are the impacts, economic diversification, skills, finance? What's just transition finance flowing into the country? How is that changing over time? And ultimately, the just transition is experienced at the local level. So these national tracking processes that we're all quite accustomed to in the UNFCCC process are actually not that fit for purpose in the context of the just transition. We've got to be looking at this at a very local level and got to be looking at it based on impact and demographic. Final 2 points, because we're running out of time. Qualitative tracking is really important. How are people feeling and experiencing the transition? What are their stories? This is a key part of M&E and kind of an untraditional M&E, but we are surveying South Africa's population and what they think and feel about the transition and collecting their stories too. And then the final thing is how we work. Our commission is striving to embody procedural justice. And we do that by broadcasting all of our meetings live to all, so anyone can follow on these deliberations. Our working group that's tabling this just transition tracking framework comprises all of these major stakeholder groups. So to your point on the process is just as important as the outcome. We certainly feel that in South Africa, and we're trying to design a process that embodies that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you also for linking into this discussion the topic of just transition finance, and maybe Nick will be tempted to pick that point up in his intervention. But Nick, first of all, from your experience in Scotland, can you give us some your view on what should be taken into account in the definition of indicators to monitor the implementation of just transition strategy? What actors should be included in institutional arrangements, and how you see an M&E framework for a just transition to unfold, and what role it plays in a just transition strategy. So well, we're very eager to hear, to go now to the very north after we've been very far in the south. So,
thank you so much, and it's a great honor to be here, and I'd like to thank the representatives from Nigeria, ICAT, WRI for hosting this meeting. I'd just like to touch on 4 points, if I may, very briefly. I'd like to place this meeting in the context of COP, particularly the Just Transition Work Programme. I'd like to give you a little bit of context about Scotland and what we're doing, the work we're doing at the moment, because it's a big year for policy in Scotland on just transition, and then look ahead and so on. So here at COP, one of the outcomes here will be a Just Transition Work Programme. I had the honour of making some scene-setting remarks for the first ministerial roundtable which was here. And one of the things that I identified as a priority where countries could come together, share experience, would be on exactly this issue of indicators and reporting at the country level, at the business and industry level, and also at the community level. So I think this meeting is very, very well timed, and we really need to make sure that we have a credible, strong, substantive just transition work program, which is not a talking shop. So that's some context. I think that's why this meeting is very well timed, and congratulations to the organisers. So just in terms of the Scotland's Just Transition Commission, which I sit on, the UK has 4 nations, and Scotland is one of the devolved nations. Just transition is very much part of the national identity of Scotland in the way it addresses the just transition. The Just Transition Commission is an advisory body. It's not executive. We have no ministers. Our purpose is to provide independent scrutiny and advice. So essentially, we are an accountability mechanism. Our membership is made up of trade unions, of business, civil society, academics, youth, and we've had 2 phases. The first phase, 2019 to 2021, the government asked us a question, actually, how should Scotland take forward just transition? And so actually a lot of engagement was made to understand just transition in the Scottish context. A report was made and the Scottish Government accepted all the recommendations. And now we're moving into a second phase, delivery phase, and that's where I was pleased to join from 2022, where the Scottish Government is issuing a series of plans, just transition plans, like we heard from Peter, for agriculture, for energy, for transport, for buildings, and importantly, for an absolutely central piece of oil and gas infrastructure in Scotland, the Grangemouth refinery, which is an absolutely anchor piece of industrial infrastructure. And so this year there have been a series of discussion papers, consultation papers that have been issued to the people of Scotland. A lot of consultation has been undertaken by the government, and we as the Commission have also been responding to that. Within the Commission, we have a MEE, not MEL, we have an MEE working group, monitoring, evaluation and engagement, and that working group involves one of my colleagues, Amina Camps, who's been working a lot on this. And I think just a reflection is, one of the things in Scotland, at least, is there is already quite a lot of indicators and data. And the just transition is essentially a bridge concept. It's bridging the transition, an environmentally driven process of economic change, with justice, labor rights, human rights, and so on. So we would expect that many indicators will already be in existence. And so one of the questions is actually how we connect these indicators, which might be in different ministries or different silos, and then identify where we may need new indicators, and with the emphasis of not inventing new indicators if we can do that. So I think that's important. So one of the things is how we're looking at core indicators around energy poverty, community benefits, supply chain, labor markets, the quality of process. So that's one of the things. So it's a very busy time in Scotland in terms of this planning process. So if I could go to just sort of the future. This meeting is perfectly timed, not just for COP, because we are about, as the Commission, about to launch our own piece of research on how we could best support the Scottish Government in terms of monitoring and evaluating their just transition plans. And I'll look at the existing data landscape, how we involve a participatory approach of the people of Scotland into the choice and identification of those monitoring and evaluation framework. So that's the first thing. So we're just about to do that. So this is great. So thanks for all. I've been learning and taking notes. This is great. Second one, I think in the approach that we've been taking within Scotland, the process of accountability and transparency is not just for the government. It is also for the business community in particular, because the business community, the financial community are also going to be making large investment decisions, and they also need to be held accountable. They can contribute hugely to the just transition, but also they could be taking decisions which actually could be harming a just transition. And if I could come to a case of that. September this year, the Scottish Government issued a discussion paper on this refinery complex, Grangemouth, September this year. Within 2 months, the owners of that complex had announced that complex would close with no provisions for consultation and no provisions for just transition. So one of the things I think that is indicating to us is clearly within the framework you have for just transition, this is primarily forward-looking. And so one of the indicators of success of just transition is, are you able to pick up these shocks? Because we are in a transition. These shocks are going to be happening more and more as technologies change, market changes, and so on. So I think that is quite a lesson. A well-structured consultative paper went out in September. Announcement to close the refinery came out in November. So we've got to be very, very smart about picking that up. So if I could maybe come back to where I started, I think this is a fantastic event. I've learned a lot. I think there is real scope for bilateral cooperation. And I think we've also, our commission has already been talking to your commission, and I hope to learn from ICAT and so on. But I would hope that we could make one of the areas within the Just Transition Work Programme collaboration on this, particularly to ensure that we reduce cost, we improve efficiency, and that it really does deliver social justice for workers, communities, and our citizens as we make progress on climate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was really very important, and I really like your point about using existing indicators, because this is something that we always strongly recommend to any of the partner countries that we work with, that you build on what you have as much as possible, and don't need to reinvent the wheel, and the data collection processes that are attached to it. And thanks also for linking this to the Just Transition Work Programme discussion. I was planning to do this in my follow-up question, but seeing the clock ticking, we may not actually get there. So it's good that you mentioned this and made the link, and actually explained to us also that indicators will hopefully play a role on that work program. So I'm now very pleased that we have two representatives from trade unions, and I want to first of all, since I missed that earlier on, welcome Mr. Eche Asusu, who's from the Nigeria Labour Congress, and he's the climate change coordinator for that Nigeria Labour Congress. And if I may, I would like to ask both of you, Diana and Eche, the same question, and to respond it both from the various perspectives, from a national perspective and from the international trade union perspectives. And the basic question is, how do you see that transparency and the data that comes with it can help to leverage the support of labor unions to a just transition strategy, and what opportunities you see either for engaging with national government or at the international level in an international process in designing a just transition strategy and ensuring adequate monitoring of it in a way that you feel satisfactory from a trade union perspective. So Diana, perhaps you can start, and then Eche can follow.
Sure, thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to start giving the global overview, and from the International Trade Union Confederation. First of all, to say that we as workers, we are one of the parts of the constituency in the International Labour Organization. And I'm happy to see here, not very well because of the lights, but Mustafa Kamal from the Green Jobs in the ILO. And actually, I'm saying this because when we talk about just transition, we always refer to the ILO guidelines, because for us are the terms of reference where the constituencies are the governments, the employers, and the workers, the trade unions. So this is where we come and we bring to the issue of the transparency, and transparency for us is key. And transparency means that workers are part of this discussion, and that we are at the table when all this is happening. And actually, I would like to congratulate South Africa, because what they are doing, creating this presidential commission, it's really important because of what you were saying, is this different group of people bringing from ministers to workers' representatives, from experts in climate is something really important. We can see it in other countries, and we understand that this is the way to proceed in the transition. But very quickly, I don't want to, because we don't have much time, so I will just wanted to mention that the social dialogue is really key for us, that the transition plans are necessary, and when those plans are designed, we need to look for the future. What are the jobs that are going to be in the future and the skills that are going to be needed? And with those skills, how are we going to prepare everyone around in order to be able to join those future jobs? And also a time frame in order to proceed with all this, because we have to be realistic. This is not something that is not going to happen overnight. We will need some time to do a proper just transition, but we will need a budget as well. That's why it's so important, the climate finance that we are discussing here at COP. And just to finalize very, very quickly, it will be great to create, in the same way that this Presidential Climate Commission in South Africa, a group to follow up all the plans that are created, to follow up the implementation, the indicators that you were, Nick was mentioning, because if you don't follow it up, it's going to be impossible to assess the progress that you are making. So with that is very general and at very global level, I would like to give the floor to our colleague Eche from Nigeria, and he will go deeper in the issues. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this very important discussion. Just like my colleague from the ITUC Global has said, this issue of just transition for us is very important, because workers need to be in the room, because these things actually revolve around the workplace. You know, talking about emission and all of that, you know, it happens essentially in the workplace, and it's important that we have the social partnership, you know, very, very, very strong, you know, in the discussions on what should be, how to manage this whole transition from carbon heavy economy to greener pathways. First, I want to apologize actually for coming in late. We had an emergency. Somebody had to be taken to the hospital, and I needed to attend to that. You know, we just finished a few minutes ago. So going forward, first I want to commend the ICAT in Nigeria. Workers in Nigeria felt a huge sense of involvement in the work of ICAT. We were consulted in the different researches done by ICAT. The workers were involved, and our opinions were sought. There were a series of you know, interviews, series of assessments and all of that, and there was a feedback to our leadership that actually there is a warming up of key institutions you know, involved in this discussion to actually get workers involved. And I think for us it was a big leap of faith, and it gave us a lot of hope that actually we're going to make a lot of progress, you know, in this journey. But then for us, there are also a number of issues that we also want to point out. Perhaps, I don't know if there will be another round of surveys and studies that will also, which I think should happen, because this should be an ongoing process, you know, concerning the informal economy. You know, many workers, Nigeria has a significant level of informality, and I think it's important that it's fully captured, you know, in the next round of engagement by ICAT. I think it will help to cover quite a number of workers who are actually out there, who don't have that kind of coverage, who don't have union representation, who don't have, you know, formal presence. It will go a long way in actually bringing in all the voices, you know, into the room. And then the health impact of climate change is also something that should be considered. I'm sure in some of the work that has been done already, that has been incorporated. But what do we do with the report is important. Going into the transparency issue, I think commitment is one, which I think ICAT and also the Ministry of Labour has scored very high. And of course, the Climate Change Commission has been quite transparent and has involved the workers, and the doors have been opened. What we are looking at is how are we going to take the opportunities that are coming from there. But I think those doors needs to be, you know, we need to keep those doors open. And for us to do that, you know, we need to have concrete responses. with the results we are getting from the research, what will be the response in terms of legislation. We want to see the laws, tweaked in a manner that actually addresses some of these concerns: health impact of climate change, economic impact of climate change, livelihood effect of climate change. We want to see the laws, begin to speak in that manner, speak that language. In that way, workers can look at it and say, yes, we are fully represented. And I believe that some of these measures will be covered in the next round of engagement by ICAT. And then finally, I would want to say that it's also very important that, like my colleague said, we think along the framework, the guidelines of the ILO. I think it has given us a very strong rail guards that can actually help us to actually look at the issues critically and objectively. So I would push or promote that we'll get maybe some kind of, like South Africa has done, a body that looks, that has a well-defined terms of reference, that can actually follow up and ensure that some of these responses we're talking about are actually carried through, that the due diligence is done. In Nigeria, I believe is something that we also need to discuss about. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you, Diana and Etche, and you highlighted in a very short time, very efficiently, a lot of extremely important points, and it's good that you mentioned health impacts, since we have here also a representative from the Ministry of Health of Nigeria, and the importance of the informal economy. I think this is critical, but overall, I think what you both underlined is the importance of credibility of the process. And I mean, that's what transparency is all about, and it's for a just transition process, it's probably more important than for any other aspect of climate change policy. And I think it's also very clear that this is not a one-off thing. It has to be a process. It has to be something that takes time, and it gets the time it needs and the attention it requires. So unfortunately, I see the clock ticking down very, very rapidly. Something has gone wrong with the time, but it's probably because of the extremely valuable and exciting contributions that we've heard from our panelists, that the time has been ticking down so rapidly, and we don't actually have time for any more discussion because time is up. But I do want to end by thanking our panelists very much for this extremely valuable, their extremely valuable contributions. I think this has only been the start of a conversation, and I think the last 90 minutes have proven how important such a conversation is here at the COP, and as Nick has pointed out, it's something that we should and need to continue, and I hope we'll have you on board as we do continue this work. Certainly the work in South Africa and Nigeria will continue, and ICAT is very proud to be able to collaborate with our partners in those two countries. So thank you all for staying with us, and thanks for the panelists and our high-level speakers.